right. Well, it's 1:21. I see that we have some people entering the session. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Vivvi is this partner session, and we have Lauren Hobbs, who is the CMO at Vivvi, a company that is reinventing childcare and early learning for today's families by working with employers to increase access and affordability to quality care. And we are also joined by Lauren Smith Brody, who is the founder of the Fifth Trimester movement and the author of the Fifth Trimester. So Lauren and Lauren, thank you both for being here with us today. I will let you guys take it from here. And they'll be talking about flexibility and the support needed to feel productive and satisfied as a flexible worker.
Thank you, Ariana, so much. We are so excited to be here this afternoon with all of you. And I just wanted to first say a huge, huge thank you to the Mom Project team, the community that everyone has built over the last few days and over the last years that you've been working on what you're working on. And the energy at this event is just incredible. And we're so grateful to be a part of it. I'm Lauren Hobbs. I'm the very proud and often very tired mother of a 6-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. And from that standpoint, for everyone who's joining us in the audience this afternoon, I just want to say a huge thank you to you as well, because as we all know, as moms and as employees, you have 1,000 ways you could be spending this afternoon, some of which are in your control, some of which are not. And we're just so grateful that you're here. So in addition to being a mom, as Ariana mentioned, I'm also the CMO at Vivvi. And at Vivvi, we're waking up every single day to build childcare and early learning solutions that work for today's families, and partnering with companies to make that care more accessible and affordable by offering it as a benefit. And I think the reason why we're talking about flexibility today is because at the center of everything that we do, it's our goal to meet families where they are. And I think we can agree that flexibility is absolutely, especially right now, a critical component of that. And I think what we don't talk about enough and what people don't talk about enough is how do you actually make flexibility work? And once you get it, and we're so lucky right now, there's so many companies offering these flexible jobs, but how do you actually make it work once you have it? And that's where I'm so excited to be here with Lauren Smith Brody, because whether we're navigating new hybrid work schedules, juggling school closures, or re-entering the workforce, I think right now it feels for everyone that we're in some version of the fifth trimester again, even if you're not. And I know that when I was going back to work after my first maternity leave, I would have absolutely wanted some tips from the woman who actually wrote the book on it. So I'm going to let Lauren introduce herself, and we're going to dive in. And I want to mention, I'll link this a few times. We have a link to share with a worksheet that we developed together, so you can go even deeper after the session on these tips and scripts.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And I echo Lauren's, I love this like Lauren squared situation.
Yeah.
Lauren's,
how we roll.
To all of you, for whatever game of Jenga or Tetris or whatever comparison you want to make, depending on how old your children are. Mine are 10 and 13, so video games all the way. It required for you to be here today. And I'm so excited to talk to you all with Lauren. So as she said, we're going to be talking about flexibility, which was a really, really important theme to the 800 women I interviewed and surveyed for my book, The Fifth Trimester. It came out about 5 years ago. And since then, I have launched a company where I go in and help other businesses and organizations do a better job of retaining retaining women and retaining people in general by supporting parents. And as Lauren said, in many ways, we are all in our fifth trimesters now, negotiating with the highest stakes in mind for the working lives that support our unpaid work, our paid work, all of it, so that together it makes us feel satisfied. So it's not just about getting the flexibility, which we can talk about. It's also about living a life that really enjoys that flexibility and makes it worth the sacrifices and the juggle and the negotiating to all pay off and really have a life that can work long-term to keep you satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think to start it off, we could talk ad nauseum about how awful COVID has been for moms, but I think the silver lining of that, and what obviously the Mom Project is focused on and what we're focused on at Vivvi, is to be part of that solution. And the number of flexible jobs out there is unbelievable. So, but we also know that one size is not fits all. So I think it would be helpful to even think about, of flexibility. There's so many different types. So where do you start in thinking about the most important questions to ask yourself and determining what kind of flexibility would be best for you?
So I think for better and for worse, many of us have had flexibility in our paid work over the last couple of years. Many of us also have not, but it's important to think about what pieces of that worked for you, which didn't, and to not negotiate for ongoing flexibility in a way that's necessarily reflective of that emergency mode, because that's not what it is. It's not a stopgap. It's meant to go long term. So there is, of course, flexibility of being able to work from home and of, potentially being able to have my dog right here or a baby in your arms. Working different hours, but also expand your definition of what flexibility is. I think it can also include job sharing. It can include a flexibility of duties. Maybe your duties actually change seasonally to keep you interested and invested in what you're doing. It can be the total time that you spend every day or every week on the job that you're doing. Of course, it's location and hours and all these things too, but it's really whatever you're envisioning. And parents have more say right now in defining what they want than I think we have ever had before.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely, so the worksheet also, it talks a lot about gaining that confidence in what your pitch is going to be. And even I experienced that so specifically when I applied for this job at Vivvi too, because I had come from, 2 years of working completely by myself and for myself as a consultant, and then transitioning back to the office and, even going to work for a childcare company, I was still nervous to ask for that 1 day a week from home that I knew I needed. I had already proved it to myself, but proving it to then, someone else. And so then going deeper on that, I think there's proving it to yourself, there's proving it to your workplace, and then there's proving it if you're part of a dual income household to your spouse or partner. And I think there's that risk factor of, if you are the parent who has more flexibility, how do you avoid becoming that default or that primary everything?
I have a few specific pieces of advice here that I like to give. First of all, there's no such thing as a primary parent and a secondary parent. We're all primaries, whether you are solo parenting, and I think it's 45% of households actually have a female breadwinner or a solo female breadwinner. Whether you are the person making more money, making less money, doing more loads of laundry or not, in an emergency, would you step in and care for your child? Is this child your responsibility, or this elder who you're caring for? Yes, then you are primary. We're all primary. It was well intended. I think that a lot of HR departments had a primary, secondary division of benefits, and yet it all divided along like gender lines. So it didn't actually make a lot of progress. We're all primary. That's the first thing, is sort of know that. And some of this, a lot like what happens in this worksheet, I think like half the worksheet is spent really doing research and internalizing the case for yourself, so that whether or not you actually use this data and these statistics and these, comparative, analysis that you've done in the conversation that you have to negotiate for it, you believe it to your core. So it's important. Everybody's primary. There's also, the value simply of your unpaid labor. And there's actually great calculators online. My friend Catherine has a podcast called The Double Shift, and she and her co-creator made this calculator. You can Google it online to see like, what is all of the unpaid labor that you do all day long worth? And when you both, if you're in a dual income family, if it's two parents, if both parents can actually start counting the work that is not paid, that really does help offset some of the inequities, and it all should count. I like integrating your lists. And then third, and perhaps even most importantly, is that you have to have childcare in place. Emergency mode, yes, many of us, and I visibly had our children around, and we should, and that should be an option if we need it, but it should be the exception. And for us to do our very best work, we need to know that our children are being cared for. Did you see, Lauren, the thing that went sort of viral?
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay. So it's for anybody who hasn't seen it, because you've all been tuning in and not on Instagram. They posted a picture from a library somewhere in the Midwest. I'm not remembering. I think maybe Kansas. Of a desk that's like a wooden desk, and it's a build out that you can get, and it has a whole separate area that's like a playpen built into the desk, and it's like the working mom solution. And like, I love librarians. Librarians are sent from heaven above. I love libraries. I like wrote my book in a library. However, this is not childcare, right? Like that was best, first of all, 1 minute. Secondly, like, no, we need structural supports around us that let us do our paid work when we're doing our paid work and not also care for children.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that, I mean, I certainly have been guilty of it. And I know probably many people can relate to, plugging for, if you have a flexible schedule or flexibility in your job, only plugging those hours that you need care or that you're working rather than having full-time care, even though you have flexibility. And I think, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think for me, it's the hardest thing to justify to myself, even though it's probably the most important.
I totally agree. I hear all the time from people who say, I'm working a 4-day week, and yet that 5th day, I don't want to have childcare that day, whether it's a cost issue, but at what cost to yourself? The whole point is that you're going to be able to work flexibly so that you can care for yourself, so that you can invest in yourself, so that you can keep going. Have agency, have the option to pop in and be with your child if you can that day, or run an errand. But for goodness sake, go to the doctor, woman. Like, go to the dentist. I'm saying to myself, go to the dentist. I haven't been to the dentist in the pandemic. There's no point in going through the negotiations of asking to work flexibly and of like leading the way and being like the guinea pig perhaps for your organization to make it work if you're not going to actually have a life that feels good. And part of having a life that feels good is having someone to care for your children.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so speaking of being that person at work, I think another interesting factor of what's going on right now is that many people are working what would have been previously described as flexible. So whether you're hybrid or everyone's out of the office, et cetera, how do you think about maintaining those boundaries as someone who has potentially a differently flexible schedule than your coworkers or your team overall?
So I think, again, it's mostly about internalizing your right to do so, internalizing the fact that you are getting your job done, knowing what your job description is, and that you are delivering whatever deliverables are to you, just on a different schedule. And then, of course, being respectful for your colleagues who probably actually care for people in their lives too. It might just not look like exactly like what yours does. And figuring out, like, can you all sync up some core hours? I know I just saw that Etsy does this, and a bunch of people sent it to me, and I was like, I've been teaching this. This is like one of the things that I teach my clients. If you can have among your team core available hours of, say, like 2 to 4. So any team meeting that happens, anything where people need to meet face to face, whether it's on a screen or in person, those core hours, wall those off, and then everything around there can be done at your own pace on your own time. And like, according to, like, sorry to be like woo woo about it, but your biorhythms, like some people work better at 8 a.m. Some people work better at 11 at night. All okay. But then also, you don't want to send the message that you're working around the clock, which is a really slippery slope for people who are working flexibly, is people think like, oh, well, she has freedom to work flexibly, so she can work anytime. You want to make sure that you're setting a good example yourself. Do not respond to emails after a certain hour unless like somebody's hair is on fire. Then of course, yes, we all have to take care of those situations. But for the most part, like, save as draft, schedule send, all of those things work in your favor to send an image of like, I'm working during daytime. I'm working the way that works for me, and I'm communicating with you at the time that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just noticing a question in the chat that I think so many people probably have, and that's, am I the only one who can't afford childcare unless I'm getting paid well? And I think that's such an important question, because it is this chicken and egg, and we've all been there. And it's actually the reason why I left consulting and went back to, be on a company track. And we've all been at that painful point where we can't make those decisions. And I mean, separately, that's why Vivvi was founded, to work with companies to bring childcare benefits to companies. But I think I don't know if you have any advice or sort of in that chicken and egg scenario. I think that's just such an important question.
So often it is on, the person who is suffering and doing the most juggling to also ask for the most and to be visible about what it is that you need. The best and most effective thing is to get together with other people you work with and present a plan for care options to your benefits department. And these people who are, running HR departments, running talent, they're reading the headlines in the Wall Street Journal. They know what's happening with attrition. They know that they're losing women and moms. They know that women are proven profit drivers, in every industry, and they will engage in this conversation with you. You can, rather than saying like, I need, X dollars more to care for my baby, it's, this company will be its healthiest if we support parents. And here are 3 ways to do it. And at the top of the list really should be some form of child.
And as you're job seeking, even before you're at a company, use that same network. I think women who are all working together to either, like, say, you have a friend who's also looking for a job, say, I'll take your kids while you are job searching, and you take my kids while you're job searching. I think there's these communities that we can leverage for, shared services that are not always thought of before you're actually at the company. And
talk to your friends. I like to say that, we are all colleagues now. It used to be that you couldn't talk about salary or benefits with your friends because that was supposed to be friend time. No, if you are a working caregiver in a pandemic, every other working caregiver in a pandemic is now your colleague, and all those barriers have gone away. See what they have at their company. It gives you a lot more to come to your people and say, hey,
absolutely. And knowing that, I think, we did a study this fall about the disparate nature between what employees think of flexibility and employers. And one of the most staggering stats that I think everyone feels probably is that 66% of working mothers don't speak up about their childcare challenges for fear of being perceived a problem employee. So I think seeing the energy on these calls and knowing that you are not alone and that you're not, speaking up is in everyone's favor. Because
if you have the ability to ask for anything, just know there are probably 10 people around you who, for some reason of not having one particular kind of privilege that you have, can't speak up. And so you're doing it not just for you in your personal life, but feel emboldened to know you're doing it really for the greater good of the company, financially, and for the greater good of society around you and your colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a ton of questions that are actually really covered in this worksheet. So I'm going to link it again. I think we're almost at time, but we'll keep going.
Sure, why not? We have to get like the hook.
But in this worksheet, Lauren goes through so many useful scripts for really like building that confidence, building your case, and then going to your current employer or going to a prospective employer. And I think that's the other thing to know, that in that interview stage is the time when you can absolutely be asking those questions, advocating for yourself, and really thinking about what you need. That's
at this
probably
point, as an interviewee, you should also be asking questions of them. You're not the person who's just on the spot, interviewing for the job. You should
absolutely
making sure.
As Lori says, all they can say is no. And if you don't ask, the answer is no.
Right. We can't solve problems we can't see. So you may as well make them visible. Know that you're doing a service in asking for it, and come up with a plan that makes it work.
Yeah. Oh, Courtney said we can keep going. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So here, let me see if I can have more questions from the chat.
There was also about sort of working hybrid and remote best practices. So I'm very open. Obviously, you can see I have notes sitting right here because I had COVID a couple weeks ago. My brain is like not all there yet. So I love this concept of buffer and building buffer into every single thing in your life, like whether it is that you have meetings. Well, this is assuming these meetings are like you're controlling your schedule, but that, like you have 15 minutes between every meeting, always. If you think you can have something delivered that needs to be sent in by 3, then tell everybody it's going to be 5. And this sounds so basic, except when you start doing it as like a reflex, you find yourself taking deep breaths and having more time for bigger thoughts, doing better work, getting a glass of water. Like these things are good for you.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely how we have tried to design every solution at Vivvi too. It's like our campuses are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because yes, maybe a normal work day is 9 to 5, but what if you want to go for a run after work and then pick your child up? Or what if you have a meeting that starts at 5:30 and you're not going to get that promotion unless you're at that meeting. And so I think even when you're in an in-home care situation or in some kind of other care situation, building in the care that you actually need to then take care of your family and yourself is just so important. And asking for that is not wrong.
Absolutely. I remember you all had Kristen Drake, who's a psychiatrist who specializes in maternal mental health, did a webinar for Vivvi, and I was watching it, and she had this great suggestion. She said, when you're dividing up tasks at home with your partner, if you have one, that one thing that needs to go on the list, this is so obvious but so crucial, is time to take care of myself and time for you to take care of yourself. Like that should count as one of the things that you are actually dividing up so that it actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
These questions and these comments are amazing.
I know. This is like the most engaged audience ever. I think you guys are incredible. Okay, what else?
The other thing I was thinking of talking about was just paying attention to, if you're working flexibly, to paying attention to internal business development. You may actually have a little bit more flexibility and freedom to have outside events and to even, like I said, to think of other working parents as your colleagues and network with them in a way that, might not have been sort of like okay earlier before the pandemic and the before times. But also internally, you have to be a little bit more deliberate about those found moments. If you're working from home, if you're working different hours, you're not going to bump into somebody, in the kitchen, like getting your breast milk out of the fridge, which, is a moment anyway. But I have a candy jar on my desk, and, it's because people love candy, but also I wanted to stay in touch with everybody. And you have the people on your team who you have to talk to. And then you have the incidental people. And very often the incidental people, it's not just that you want to know what's going on in their personal life, which is wonderful. And, you want them to know about you, but also you want to know what they have coming up. You want to know who they're talking to. You want to introduce them to someone. And these little incidental moments we have to manufacture. So some of them, actually require making 10-minute meetings with people. And you can say, I watched this amazing, webinar the other day, and this lady said that I should make like 10-minute calls with people who I would have otherwise bumped into. Like, let that be your excuse. But it's really
absolutely. And there's so many. I mean, I think back to that you're interviewing the company and the company is interviewing you. Ask what if a role is fully remote or hybrid. Ask what the company has set up for those roles and how they're integrated into general best practices if other people are in the office. I think those little things are so important when we're thinking about roles that are flexible, but they're not like the typical, mom track or what have you that of the past. And how do you advocate for yourself within those moments of actually making that happen and banding together with groups of people who are in that same scenario.
Mm-hmm. I love this. Dominique just said a lot of companies are figuring it out as well. Don't assume they have it fully figured out. They don't.
Absolutely.
One thing I see work all the time is for you to say to someone, let me guinea pig this for you. People don't want to sign in blood that they're going to give you something because then they have to, it sets precedent legally. And it's not that. It's like, I'm going to try this out for this amount of time and report back. Like, I'm going to be your pilot.
Yeah. And I mean, especially for companies that are advertising their jobs on sites like the Mom Project or as a returnship or what have you, or as any flexible worker, you can put that, you can sort of say to them, like, this is your goal, right? So this is what working moms need. And let me be that first person that tests it out, and you come to me if it's not working.
And expand. I love also the idea of expanding our definition of who's a caregiver. I would assume probably the vast majority of us on this call right now are moms, right? However, when we include people who have elder care responsibilities or older children or spousal care, or like even, I know this is like renegade, but like even self-care counts as being in care of someone. And when you think of it that way, this becomes a lot less stigmatized. Probably everyone you work with cares for someone in their life, and you should feel really emboldened by that.
Yeah. Or everyone works with a caregiver or on their team. I mean, I think that's the other thing about most moms and dads are in that middle to upper management role where, if they're not getting their work done, then their team is hindered. And so these issues affect around childcare affect so many more people than just the parents at a company. So I think, anyone who's either reported to or sat next to a parent knows that, or been Zoom bombed, which we all have by a 2-year-old, knows that it affects more than just us on these calls.
It's so important to have a growth mindset, about the opportunity in front of you and about the person who you're interviewing with or negotiating with, because if they're at a level, say they're half a generation above you, and they're seeing all this happen, this is like terrifying and amazing, but they have something working in their favor that made them a survivor, right? Like if the pyramid is like, women at the bottom, women at the top, like if they're up here in particular, they had something working in their favor that is going to bias them, but they also have a huge amount of responsibility to keep that in mind, to think of it. And so when you're, mid-level or whatever, offering that information for them, you're helping educate them. You're helping them be a better leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How are we doing on time?
Here's another, just keep going.
The comments are so good.
Yeah. Let's see. Would it be too bold to ask Danielle? Would it be too bold to ask an HM? I don't know if I know what an HM is. How they assist or support their employees in their work-life balance? I think absolutely not. I think if a company is not
hiring manager.
Hiring manager.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's not too bold.
Yeah, I think that's like table stakes at this point. And if a company's not thinking about that, they're way behind their competitors.
I saw Kalina, kind of a very gentle way into that is something Kalina just suggested in the chat earlier. She said, ask them how they supported parents over the pandemic, how they supported their employees over the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's a really good sort of, I think if you're too afraid to ask it from your own standpoint, asking it about other people or the history of the company is a really great workaround.
You could even say, there's been so much innovation in support offered for employees over this time. What are you proudest of? What's been the biggest challenge?
Yeah. Okay, Jessica, this is the worksheet is for you. So I often feel more insecure about inquiring support for my family care and need for flexibility when I interview with a woman versus a man, usually feeling like if she can handle it, I should be able to too. Can you give me a tip about changing my mindset about that? That's such a good question.
You go. I was reading something else.
Yeah. I think to Lauren's point earlier, these generational shifts and to the point of every family's needs are different. That woman might have had a totally different caregiving setup or relationship or family setup than you. So I think don't assume that, because they're handling it this way or because they seem like they have their SHIT together that they do. The person sometimes I'm like, I've had such a circuitous path to get where I am and so much imposter syndrome. And, I was that mom in my closet this morning with my 2-year-old, like waving my phone around. And I was like, I have to pay attention to what shirt I'm wearing today as I'm on this panel. I just think we are in it together, and you can only develop your own confidence if you practice for yourself asking those questions. And so, practice to a friend, practice to a mentor who's a woman who you respect, who might be a little tougher on you. But I think the humanization of the last 2 years is vast, and we can't underestimate how, if you lead with empathy, that others will follow. And if they don't, it's probably not the right fit for you anyway. So you will learn something.
Take your talent elsewhere. I saw a great question from Mary. I can't read my handwriting. Garvin, who said, wanted to know if you're working flexibly, should that necessarily mean that you have to work at reduced pay? Because that raises questions about childcare.
Absolutely.
And the answer is Definitely not. There, you know, of course, like if you're going to be working, you know, dramatically reduced hours and dramatically reduced duties, then yes, of course. However, ask yourself, figure out what the job description is. Are you still getting the job done, just doing it differently on different hours at your pace or whatever? Then you should still be paid for the whole job. If you're doing the whole job, you should be paid for the whole job. There's also a threshold that you should know about in a lot of businesses where they'll have a cutoff for what counts as part-time versus full-time. For some places, it's 26 hours is kind of typical, at which point you're not entitled to benefits. So you have to think about your benefits as part of your comp, especially if we're talking about, you know, health insurance to, you know, for your family, for your children. So it's really important to remember that if you're going to be working a 4-day week and you're going to be encroached upon, because you probably will. I mean, I hope you draw boundaries better than most people, but you may be encroached upon. If you don't want to feel incredible resentment, you know, which will ultimately be toxic to your this job, then you need to make sure that you are shoring up your compensation and that you're still being compensated for doing a whole job. There's also a question about menopause supports, which is such a great question. And Beth, who asked it, you know, noted that it coincides for a lot of women with upper management, you know, their peak earning years, you know, they've got the most influence in leadership ever, and they're going through menopause. Any support? I don't know of specific companies that have enacted policies to support menopause. However, there are tremendous health benefits, mental health benefits available that have not been available before. And a lot of, there's just research all over the place that shows that people aren't aware of what's actually available to them, because it's not really actually on your employer to say like, hey, come use all these things we're offering. So you should just like on your calendar, at least once a year, if not once a quarter, review what's available to you and use it, because things that don't get used don't get renewed. And there are a lot, the best companies I'm seeing right now are doing a good job of supporting all aspects of women's health. So they're offering bereavement leave, you know, for pregnancy loss. They're offering fertility benefits. It used to be, you know, like, okay, we're going to pay for you to help you pay to freeze your eggs, which is fantastic. But you can't have that and then not also have paid family leave on the other side of you know.
And then I would argue, to take it a step further, having those two things and not some kind of childcare benefit is
right.
Because you're not going to retain those.
Disaster. It has to start with childcare and paid leave, and then expand out.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been often talking recently about sort of the marathon versus the sprint, and the sprint is that, you know, actually getting pregnant and having the child. And so many companies are stepping up to the plate with better paid leave options, and which is fantastic. And then they're not thinking about that next 0 to 5, which I'm particularly in it with a 3 and a 6-year-old, and you've been there before, but that's that early childhood marathon where care is expensive, and public schools have not started yet, and women are most likely to leave the workforce or take a break. And so, you know, the companies that are offering childcare, some kind of benefit, are just, I think, more in a much better position to retain those women.
All the deals. Yeah. And then once you retain them, it's really easy to make the case for return on investment for keeping women, right? Because we know that, you know, there's all kinds of amazing studies. I think some of them are actually linked on in the worksheet, right? Didn't we add them to the end of it?
Absolutely,
really make the economic case for retaining women. And of course, how do you retain women? You support parents, moms and dads.
Okay, I'm coming up to time. We were supposed to be on for 15 minutes.
I know.
We're just keeping going.
I don't know about you. Or we're on the East Coast for anybody who's not on the East Coast. So I have 6 minutes.
Okay, let's see. I think we could do one more question.
Oh, and all of this talk, like if you have worked for an employer or you're applying for an employer that doesn't have all of these bells and whistles, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that you have an amazing opportunity to add to it. And also it should really, fuel your effort among your friends, colleagues, everyone, to talk about the necessity of this kind of support at a federal level. Because what happens is then the states can improve upon it and private businesses can improve upon it and become even more attractive employers. But we all deserve a baseline of support. Something else you can ask, this is a little bit of a tricky question, but if you're asking about benefits and support and you are in the position to have a corporate role but you're at a business that has, say, fulfillment center workers, hourly workers, it will impact you if you know that other employees at your company are not being treated as well as you are. So you should ask that hard question too, of, how universal are these benefits? Who gets them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think, the more, even if you're at a 5-person startup to a 50,000 person organization, these conversations are valid. And the company might not have the dollars to support every single benefit that you want when they start, but if you're advocating for them and you are part of that change, they're more likely to build them as they go.
And, oh my gosh, I'm just going to squeeze every point in here. And you are taking on I'm going to point my pen at the screen. If you're taking on a leadership role in an employee resource group, if you are contributing your time at your company toward any kind of retention building activity, you're mentoring, you're leading the internship program, you're doing all these things. These are things that require a lot of skills that a lot of women have been conditioned to have in spades, which is great. We are nurturers, and I no longer shy away from that as like anti-feminist. Like, okay, we're nurturers. That makes us actually great leaders and managers. But if you are doing that work, you should be recognized for it. You should be rewarded for it. You should be keeping a list for yourself of all of the 12 things that you did this month that helped other people be able to stay and do their jobs well, that you need to bring up at your review, because that work deserves to be rewarded. And that is the next frontier of what I'm seeing in terms of how we measure our success in a time when so many companies are losing top talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say one final thank you to you, Lauren, and Lauren, and the Mom Project, and for everyone who has been so active in this chat. It's incredible to feel the energy from that. So thank you. And just thank you. And
this is important. She's a single mother. Does an employee need to know if I'm a single mother? Will it hinder my chance? No, they do not need to know. No. They do not need to know. However, you should ask for every damn thing you need to be able to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great note to end on. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Be well.
Take care.